us for more. CNBC contributor Mark Fields, former president and CEO of Ford Motor Company. Very good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Oh, thanks, Wolford.
I wanted to talk, before we get to some of that Ford news, just about what you make of the sort of reinvigorated second-hand car sales market across the U.S. and whether that, I guess, a temporary positive for just numbers of sales, but whether that's a long-term negative for the automakers if people kind of have been reintroduced to what you can get in the second-hand car market.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you look at the new car market, it's basically folks that have a certain income level. They're more wealthy, and they tend to always want new cars. I do think, to your point on the used car market, you have an interesting situation here right now where the used car market is pretty buoyant, and the prices of used cars are quite high and higher than the experts predicted. And that's a combination of two factors. One, you haven't had some of the large rental companies defleeting yet. That will come in the fourth quarter. And then secondly, you have a lot of low mileage leases that the automakers have customers have bought them, and they provided extensions for those lease ends during COVID. Those now are coming due, so those vehicles will be coming back into the marketplace. So I think you'll see that reverse in the fourth quarter, where used car prices will go down precipitously, which could help that market even more.
And talking of other sort of big themes that we might have experienced in 2020, is there an element with which people might have fallen back in love with driving? Perhaps people that over the last 5 years had been drawn towards ride-sharing, Ubers of this world, and have bought a car and now won't go back to Ubers and Lyfts as they had done beforehand?
Well, I do think, as you look at factors like folks that are moving from the urban centers into suburbs and things of that nature, as well as millennials kind of coming into the life stage where they're having kids and things of that nature, that was already, I think, starting to help the car industry, where you'd have more car ownership. I do think with COVID, folks are probably thinking of cars not only as transportation, but almost as personal protection equipment. And so, rather than getting on a plane, they'll drive to their vacation area or wherever they want to go to, or rather than taking mass transit into their jobs, if they go into their jobs in the future, they'll feel much more comfortable with their own vehicles. So I think there's a lot of puts and takes to what will happen to the industry, but I do think that is a big positive.
We got a pretty solid print today, Mark, on ISM manufacturing overall. What's your sense of how fast auto production, though, in particular, has come back online as we're still dealing with the fallout of the pandemic and now this increased demand?
Well, the biggest problem right now for the automakers is getting labor. And I'll put that into two parts. On the automaker side, the automaker plants, you're seeing higher levels of absenteeism because of employees, COVID concerns, whether they have folks at home that are elderly that they live with or have pre-existing conditions. You actually see some manufacturers either cutting shifts or alternatively hiring more temporary workers. But then even if you solve that problem, it's all about the supply base. There's unless you have a parts flow coming to the plants, you won't be able to operate them. And so the biggest problem in the supply base, again, is it's tough getting labor, right? Because you have a number of employees that, they have high absenteeism for the COVID-related concerns I mentioned earlier. And that might seem kind of odd, right? In an economy where we have unemployment over 10%. But the bottom line is jobs on the factory floor, these are hard jobs. These are physically taxing. It's different than jobs that are lost in travel or retail or things of that nature. And then secondarily, a lot of the plants for the supply base are either in suburban or rural areas. So the populations are less, you don't have as much to draw on, so labor is not exactly fluid. So I think the biggest challenge for the industry going forward in the last 4 months of the year is getting production to where they want it to be, particularly with SUVs and full-size pickups, because that's where the demand is right now.